up everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we will be reacting to how NASCAR was faster than Ferrari at Le Mans. I'm very excited to get into this. One of you requested this specific video. I do love it when the 24 hours of Le Mans comes around every year. I'm looking forward to it this year. So with that being said, let's just get straight into it. But before we do that, make sure you subscribe. Over half of you that are watching my videos still not subscribed. Just hit the bell, it takes 2 seconds. And if you'd like to become a member on my channel and receive exclusive perks, then you can also do that by hitting the join button down below. Right, let's get into it.
Look at this. Yep, that's a NASCAR stock car competing with GTs and prototypes at Le Mans. And they were quicker than Ferrari, Aston Martin and Porsche. It's a next-gen Camaro that has been adapted to work at Le Mans. One of the bigger changes is that they're running more road courses than they used to, racing at tracks like Circuit of the Americas, Watkins Glen,
just had that race.
and a favourite of mine, the Charlotte Roval. So, stock cars aren't just for turning left, and they've shown that in recent seasons. But not in the same way that GT cars or prototypes can handle Le Mans for 24 hours though, right? So NASCAR teamed up with Hendrick Motorsports to take a ZL1 Camaro stock car to Le Mans, taking a 3,000 pound stock car with no doors, no headlights, and a 5.8 litre rumbling V8 to Le Mans. It seems absolutely bonkers. And many fans were excited to see a NASCAR race at Le Mans, and many were not.
I've had a lot of drivers say, why are you doing this? What do you get out of it? Fun. What's the point otherwise? If you're not smiling, what's the point of doing it?
Lots of people were concerned that the car would keep up on the straights, but be a moving chicane through the corners. The Le Mans organisers even proposed waving a white flag at every marshal post the car drove past to warn other classes it was there. And this is literally the flag that marshals wave to warn you that a crashed or broken car is slowly driving back to the pits. And that's a bit insulting, really. And I'm not sure the marshals would have been keen either. Recruiting Mike Rockenfeller, Le Mans winner with Audi, the NASCAR legend Jimmy Johnson, and Jenson Button. And that's quite a lineup.
Big up.
And they were quick. They entered under the Garage 56 entry, the experimental entry that we've seen a few times before. For example, no matter where they qualified, they would still have to start at the back of the pack. Now, although NASCAR race on road circuits, a stock car would be a fair way off the pace compared to a GTE car. Le Mans is actually pretty unique as it has several super long straights, but also fast sweeping corners and super tight chicanes. Aerodynamic efficiency is everything at Le Mans. So, what did they do? Well, the first thing was that the car didn't need to conform to any rulebook. The standard engine restrictions that apply in NASCAR came off. So in Cup racing, the engine runs at 510 horsepower on the fast tracks and 670 horsepower everywhere else. But Hendrick Motorsports got the engine up to about 750 horsepower. That's 150 more than the 600 horsepower that the GTE cars generally run. But they could have actually got more out of it if it weren't for one thing. The engine normally runs for 500 miles or so before a rebuild, whereas in a 24-hour race, this engine would need to have a life cycle of around 5,000 miles. So they capped the RPM limit a little lower to reduce stress on the valve train. But the fundamental components of the engine stayed exactly the same as the stock car. And that meant that it sounded absolutely awesome. Just listen to the difference compared to the other cars.
Wow.
The rear-mounted transaxle
that is the most euphoric noise ever.
But with one difference. They ran a Formula 1 style steering wheel with paddle shift rather than the sequential stick shift on the stock car. Now, with all that power, the issue of stopping the car became a problem. So they swapped the usual steer brakes that don't get used a whole bunch on a stock car and swapped them for full carbon brakes, much like the other cars on the grid at Le Mans. The biggest visual difference on this car is all of the aero. Just look at it. The car has enormous dive planes on the front, a massive front splitter, and enormous canards on the rear. These dive planes work by directing the air upwards, creating an equal and opposite reaction. The aero package was all to create as much downforce as possible without losing the NASCAR look of the car. They could have added an enormous rear wing to the car, but decided that's not the NASCAR way. So they stuck with a spoiler, but made it absolutely enormous. The result was that the car created 50% more downforce than its next-gen counterparts. And one other thing they kept the same was the lack of doors. So during the pit stops, the drivers were climbing through the windows. Oh, And the pit crew were also keeping up with the GTE teams, despite not having air jacks and using a manual jack. Goodyear worked with the team to create a new tyre as well. They understood that the car would be super rear limited, with the hard traction zones at Le Mans as well as the fast corners. So if they ran the standard Cup tyre, they would have to pit twice as often as the GTE cars. So Goodyear designed a custom tyre that's 2 inches wider at the rear. So the team shed 220 kilograms from the car. They're getting super clever with materials. Firstly, there are a load of things that this car just doesn't need.
No
Stock
way.
cars have special reinforced structures at the front and rear of the car, allowing them to bump draft, where one car can sit in the slipstream with less drag and it actually pushes the car in front forwards. It allows two cars to work together, and it's super common in oval racing. So they bin that, and then they swap lots of panels for carbon fibre rather than the steel. Goodyear even cut down the weight of each tyre. And also, there was one other thing. This car had to have headlights. And we all know that stock cars run stickers. And the car drove well. It was clear that this Camaro could be a real match for the GTE cars, which to many was a real surprise.
I have to say, it's pretty fun to drive. It's really fun to drive. You know, I think a lot of people were scared at how slow it would be through the Porsche curves.
Then, with a bit more work before qualifying, the Camaro out-qualified the entire GTE field. Jenson Button set a time of 3 minutes 47.9. A proper quick time around this circuit, with the fastest GTE setting a time of 3 minutes and 50.
Wow.
Now, that is impressive.
Yeah.
But there's one thing I need to make clear. The GTE field are a closely regulated pack, with massive regulations on aero, power, tyres, and the Nascar was completely free of regulation. And the GTE field has a balance of performance, BOP, where limits are put on weight, power, fuel load, and more to make sure all the very different GTE cars are super close in performance, with the order being Hypercar, LMP2, GTE, then Garage 56. But given the pace difference, they were concerned about the carnage of the Nascar coming through the field in the first few laps. So they let the car start between the GTEs and the LMP2s. And on the race start, the Nascar absolutely left the GTE field.
Wow.
And even overtook a couple of LMP2 cars. The car absolutely flew in the traction zones and on the first half of the straights, but the aero wasn't quite as efficient at the end of the straights, meaning that the GTEs caught them up, but braking was their main issue. The car was a massive fan favourite, with many fans saying you could hear the car coming for miles, with many complaining that it was the car keeping them awake through the night. So the car worked well at the start of the race.
It's not a bad noise to keep you awake.
Did its thing. It absolutely tipped down with cars skidding off everywhere. The Garage 56 car held on, because despite the tyres, the aero and the lower weight, this thing was a handful. You could see it was super sketchy on braking through the corner and also on the exit. But you find that cars with more power than grip are just a real handful. But if balanced really well, they can be incredibly fun to drive. But later in the race, they had their first big issue. The gearbox exploded. All that power had destroyed the gearbox entirely, with it sounding absolutely dreadful. Just listen to this.
Oh,
and this
dear.
was the Nascar out, because you're not allowed to swap a gearbox at Le Mans. But after asking nicely, the team actually were allowed to swap it, as they were the experimental entry. So after an hour in the garage, the car was back out there. But this problem had pushed them back to 39th overall before finishing the race.
A few moments later.
That was really interesting to me. I loved learning about the aerodynamics and everything on a car. Like, I find it so fascinating in F1. Like, I absolutely hate it. I'm just gonna go on a girl rant at the moment. I hate it when boys are like, oh, you only watch F1 because of the drivers. Yeah, of course. I watch drivers. I watch F1 for the drivers that are sat in their helmets for the majority of the race. Like, wow. I hate it. Or they're like, oh, you're into F1 because of Drive to Survive. No. I got into F1 in 2017. Thank you very much. I just hate it. Like, they just don't expect. There's such a stereotype. And they don't expect a woman to love F1 because of the cars or the science behind it. Like, I just hate it. That's my rant over. So yeah, I find it fascinating, like, learning about like the aerodynamics of cars. Like, that was so fascinating to me how they were able to do that, and they were faster than the like Ferraris and stuff at Le Mans. That was very interesting. When they showed the difference between the other cars and then the Nascar driving past, that was very that sound is like the most euphoric noise ever. Love it. So with that being said, if you have any other videos that you'd like me to react to, drop them in the comments. I'm working my way through everybody's suggestions at the moment. If you did want to check out any of my other socials, they are all linked down below. And if you wanted to become a member on my channel and receive exclusive perks, then you can also do that by hitting the join button down below. But I hope you enjoyed today's reaction, and I will catch you next time for the next one. Bye!